Right, good evening, members. Are we ready to commence tonight's proceedings? Excellent. I'm in the interim chairman role until you guys appoint your chairman this evening. So if I may start by saying good evening to everyone here this evening. And I'd firstly like to welcome you to the first meeting of the Combined Scrutiny Committee. My name is Kim Cole and I'm the Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer for Braintree District Council. Just to give a little bit of context as to why we're here this evening, the Combined Scrutiny Committee tonight is comprised of members of both the Community Development Scrutiny Committee and Partnership Development Scrutiny Committee. The committee has been established in response to a motion submitted by Councillor Joe Beavis on the cost of living crisis, which was approved at the meeting of full council on the 20th of June 2022. The committee will be examining the topic under the guise of a short-term scrutiny review, which will take place over 2 meetings, further to which the committee will compile its recommendations and produce a scrutiny report for consideration by Cabinet and full council in autumn. Before the meeting proceeds, please can we look to appoint a chairman for the committee. Members, please can I have your nominations for chairman of the Combined Scrutiny Committee? Councillor Mrs Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. Could I...
Thank you.
Could I propose Councillor Mrs Garrett as chairman?
Many thanks. Please, can I have a seconder for the wonderful? Thank you, Mrs. Walters. You're not working.
May I second that?
You may. Thank you very much. Councillor Wright, sorry.
I nominate James Abbott. Councillor James Abbott.
Okay, no, that's lovely. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Abbott? Unfortunately not. Okay, unfortunately that one hasn't got a seconder, that will not be proceeded and we will proceed with the one.
Kim, I will second him just so that
it
can show that it's fair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Mrs Pell. Okay, as we have 2 nominations before us this evening, I will invite each member by way of a ballot to indicate their chosen chairman. It will be done by way of a show of hands. Members will only be able to vote once for their chosen chairman. As Councillor Mrs Garrett was nominated first, if I may do the vote in favour of Councillor Garrett as chairman this evening. All those in favour? Thank you very much. All those against? All those abstain? Lovely. And if I can do the second nomination this evening, which was Councillor Abbott, could I have a vote by way of hands for Councillor Abbott for chairman this evening? Lovely, I make that 2. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. The motion is now carried. I can confirm that Councillor Garrett, you have been appointed as chairman this evening. If you would like to come and take your seat as chairman, I wasn't brave enough to sit in the chairman's seat for the start, so please do come and join me at the table. Lovely. I'll just give you a moment to settle in. It's okay, we'll skip it. It is being webcast, but we can sort it. It's fine.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, I see. Lovely. Councillor Mrs Garrett, I hand over to you for today's proceedings.
Right.
Thank you, Kim, and members. I'd just like to make a few points of note before we begin. Please can I remind you that this meeting is being webcast. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for this evening. However, should the fire alarm sound, members are asked to vacate the chamber via the fire exit to the rear and assemble in the car park. As we move through the meeting, please can I remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when they have finished speaking. Members, we also have a number of officers, both internal and external, present at the meeting this evening, including Mr Tom Walker, Executive Director at Essex County Council, who has joined the meeting virtually. Welcome, Mr Walker. And other officers, thank you very much for your attendance. And thank you, yes, thank you for coming to this meeting and giving up your time. I shall now proceed with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Mrs Sandham, Councillor Courtauld and Councillor Miss Weeks. Is there anybody else? Kim, that's it? Yeah? If there are no more apologies, I'll proceed to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest. No? No declarations, lovely. Thank you. I'll proceed to item 3, public question time. Members, I confirm that there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting. Right, members, we've already dealt with agenda item 4, appointment of the chairman, so we'll now proceed to agenda item 5, terms of reference and work programme. Members, the report for this item is set out on pages 5 to 8 of the agenda. I'll now invite Kim Cole, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, to present the report. Thank you, Kim.
Many thanks. Now wearing my second hat for this evening. So the report, as we've heard, is set out in the agenda at pages 5, with the recommendation that members note the terms of reference and the work programme for this scrutiny committee in relation to the cost of living crisis. As I set out in the introduction to this meeting, this scrutiny review came about as a result of a motion that was brought before full council in June, and was in relation to the cost of living crisis and the efforts nationally that were being done to support those residents nationally in terms of the difficulties that they are all facing. Particularly for the terms of this particular committee, the motion, and I'll read the wording just so that we're absolutely clear, sets out that the council requires the chairman of the Community Development Group and the Partnership Development Scrutiny Committee to establish a combined committee consisting of all members of the respective 2 scrutiny committees, and that's who we have here today. And the remit of the combined committee will be to review the measures that this council and its partners in Essex are already offering and to recommend any further assistance that can be delivered this financial year for the residents of Braintree District. In order to do that, and in line with that particular motion, the committee has been established, and it will be meeting on 2 separate occasions, one this evening and one in early September. Members, the terms of reference are set out in the appendix to the report on page 8. For the purposes of today's meeting, that will be in relation to evidence gathering, if that terms of reference is approved tonight. And in anticipation, we do have a number of Braintree District Council officers here present today. I think there's 7 of us here ready to give a presentation and help you provide some of that evidence and support you in assessing the remit of the scrutiny committee in terms of reference. But we also have with us Tom Walker from Essex County Council joining us virtually, and he will also be giving a presentation to you this evening setting out some of the efforts that are being done on a county level. I wasn't going to go into too much more detail. I was going to leave most of the evening, if I can, for you to hear all the evidence from the officers that are here present, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kim. Do members have any questions in respect of the report? No? No questions? Then we will ask to note the terms of reference and work programme for the scrutiny review. Please can I take it that these are noted, and please indicate by a show of hands. That's everyone. Thank you. Thank you, members. The report has been noted. We'll now proceed with agenda item 6, scrutiny review into the cost of living crisis, first evidence gathering session. Right, members, this meeting marks the committee's first evidence gathering session for the scrutiny review into the cost of living crisis. As part of the session, members will receive 2 separate presentations from officers. I understand that the first presentation will be provided by Tom Walker, Executive Director at Essex County Council. And can I once again welcome Tom to the meeting, who has joined us virtually. Tom, could you kindly introduce yourself to the committee and commence with your presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Can I firstly check you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly well, thank you.
Very good. If at any point you need me to speak louder or quieter, then please say. Just by way of introduction, so my job title is, as you say, Executive Director Economy, Investment and Public Health at Essex County Council. I've been there nearly 4 months, and prior to that spent 24 years in national government in Whitehall, not working directly on these issues, but certainly on regeneration, on local government, on planning. And I've come to Essex to sort of do that sort of work in the real world and in real life. My job's of relevance to this. So I ran the Cities and Local Growth Unit, which ran all of the local government's growth programmes from 2014 to 2017. I was the Deputy Chief Exec of Homes England 2017 to 2019. And after a couple of other things in between last year, ran the Levelling Up Task Force under Neil O'Brien firstly, then Andy Haldane, and then Michael Gove, publishing the white paper in February. I've got 10 slides here, which I will go through quite quickly. And for members and officers in Braintree, first thing I should say is I hope any analysis here conforms to yours. There's some data that our strategy team have put up against Braintree data. If you think it looks wrong, please say we can get our officers to talk about the detail, but hopefully it matches. The data I'll share is mainly illustrative, and there's quite a lot of it. We can again follow that up and provide more detail if you would like it. And I'll say a few things about levelling up towards the end, but I'll go through the slides relatively quickly if that's okay, and then do my very best to answer questions from colleagues. I think as perhaps the only other caveat to say is levelling up, cost of living is obviously a broad overarching term which affects very many parts of the council, including those way beyond my own remit. So I'll be speaking on behalf of ECC, but again, if there are things I need to follow up on, I will do so. So if you're happy for me to proceed, and I will keep going until I'm interrupted, basically, if we could go on to the next slide, please. So, and apologies, I can't tell whether these are legible in the room. I'll assume that you can read them, but I'm not going to read out every single word on here, so I hope they're projected on a big screen or members and officers have got them. I mean, this is just some of our headline data on the general issue of finance, wellbeing and resilience in Essex. And these are pretty self-explanatory statistics, which I'll come on to show are getting worse, but show, I think, the sort of level that we can drill down to and draw out a couple of the key demographic factors. So, for example, on the left-hand side, the majority of those Essex households, as you might expect, experiencing financial pressure, contain at least one working adult. So this is not just a crisis of those in work. And perhaps the third one on the right-hand side, applications into our essential living fund are going up and up. So you sort of got a wide range of patterns. I'll show some more slides on this, but this is just the sort of summary data we hold at accounting level. As I say, we're happy to make available to everyone and anyone that wants to see it in more detail. If you just go on then to the next slide. So this, and then the subsequent one is on Braintree. So this is a slide on fuel poverty. So whoever's controlling the slides go on to the thank you. So there's this slide, which is Essex County Council overall. The next one shows the Braintree figures. So this just shows, and I think you know this, it's been in the press all day and in the media all day long. I haven't listened to the news yet today, but I see Gordon Brown is commenting on it, about the scale depending on the level of energy price increase. So we're moving from about 10% of households across the county being in fuel poverty through to, at the most extreme end, up to 40%, and it may well go higher. And those are the Essex figures. If you could go on to the next slide, please. There's a cut of this data are on the Braintree figures. This is where I say I hope our analysis conforms to your analysis. And here you see, if you take that third measure, 42, nearly 43% of Braintree residents on that highest modelled increase would be in fuel poverty, which is just slightly ahead of what we see across the county. And I think you might expect to see that because of the rural dimension of Braintree. If you go on then to the next slide, again, I'm not here to tell you, by the way, about Braintree and effects on your borough. You will know this as well as I do, but this shows where the concentrations might fall, again, on those different price scenarios, and where we will see the concentration of those in fuel poverty. I'll be honest, I don't know the geography of Braintree particularly well. I'm getting to know Essex as a county, but you'll recognise this map and it will conform, I think, to what you see. But again, we can illustrate that data, we can map it, we can work with your analysts. Fuel poverty is, of course, a mix of income, of energy requirement and fuel price. So you've got those three things driving this at any one point, and the mainstream press is full of the data and the analysis at the moment. If you go on, please, to the next slide. This is just, and there's a lot in here. I won't read it out, but starts to pull out the type of household most affected on those different price points. A 0% change, a 54% increase, and a 65% increase. And here you can just see how they slide up. And on the left-hand side, so those groups are most affected. That's effectively what this slide is showing. Elderly people with limited pension income, including mostly living alone, urban residents in high-density social housing, and then elderly people with assets who enjoy a comfortable retirement. And you can see even on all of these criteria, all the measures are different, this huge increase in those stuck or captured in fuel poverty, depending on the level of increase. And again, this is evidence in its own right, but also illustrative of the sort of analysis that we could help you with as you proceed with your inquiry. If we can go on to the next slide, please. This just, if you click through so all the animations come up. Thank you. And next, there should be 2 or 3 more. So here, another couple of detailed charts. So the one to look at on this is the purple, red and green line. And this is just showing our modelling of what might happen to the council's budget if we see 2 things. So the purple line is our current MTRS budget. The red line shows what would happen if there was an increase in the council tax support spend, obviously more people falling in or more generous offering. And that, as the right-hand text says at the bottom there, a 10% increase in council tax support could reduce the amount of tax collected by 8 million. And then the green line shows what would happen if the collection rate fall by just 2%. So if people stop paying their council tax, that would lead to a 16 million reduction in tax income. So here, again, you will know this, but it's why we as a council and you as a council, not just our residents that might be vulnerable, but the impacts may well affect our own budget. So there's a huge risk. I won't try and explain all the detailed methodology. I was getting someone to explain it. Just at the end of today, why do you see a bulge in 23, 24? And that's to do with a lag in the collection. But the key point is those 2 drivers on council tax collection might see us as a county council and you as a district in a much less advantageous position, if that makes sense. I'll go on then 2 slides to the terms of reference. What are we doing? So the first slide, if you go on to the next one, please, shows what can be done. So I think many around this room will recognise that very many of the levers are actually national levers. You see that through the Conservative Party election, leadership election campaign. You saw it earlier in the year when the government said it wouldn't step in, and then it did step in. So I think local government as a whole should be looking to lobby on tax and benefits, on regulation, possible market interventions and government support packages. Those are the sorts of things we might see delivered nationally. And the next slide I'll come on to is then areas where we are either acting or could act. And on the right-hand side, this is from one of our resident polls. It's not including national government. It's asking, who do you think, at a local level, which of the following organisations do you believe have a responsibility for tackling rising costs of living? Unsurprisingly, most people, or the top two, are county council, district and borough council, but you see the others who might play a role there. So just two other bits of evidence. If you go on then to the next slide, please. So this is the original paper we did for the leaders and chief execs meeting, I think in June. And there's a longer paper that sits behind this, and I won't go to the detail of data on the take-up of these, but we started to think about things that we're doing now. So in that left-hand box are live schemes, projects, interventions, so hardship grants, financial advice and guidance, where we're partnering up with HSBC, school holiday clubs, obviously in play now, and we're linked up with Peabody on support for families at risk for eviction. So there's some very short-term things we've done, and then there are some more medium-term measures. Again, I'm not going to read them all out here. We might come back to some of these that we could take collective action across the county, perhaps working with national government on. And then there are some long-term issues, which I don't think is the focus of this inquiry, but some of the wider Essex levelling up work gets to that, the role of levelling up agenda, as I say, of devolution, actually some of the bigger transitions in the economy, net zero and the energy transition. So we started to come in short-term, medium-term and long-term. Happy to say more about any of those or follow up after the evidence session with more detail if you want it. If you go on then to the next slides, I'll be very quick on these last three. They're here more for completion. You know that we're committed and published everyone's Essex and then the Essex Levelling Up white paper before I joined the organisation. This slide just takes it's a bit of a hybrid slide, the four national pillars of levelling up. So the bold text at the top of each of those coloured boxes, boosting productivity, pay, jobs and living standards. The equivalent sentence is the national one, and then sets out what we are doing within the county against each of those, targeted on our levelling up places, of which Braintree is run, and I was at the launch, centred on rural communities and the work we're doing with you earlier this summer. So we've got a bundle of work which is not about payments to households, but about the more fundamental conditions that we are starting. And if Kevin, our leader, or Louise, our deputy leader, was here, they would say this is a generation's worth of work, but we are starting it now. There are two final slides. I won't talk to them at all in any detail, but there's a slide on, if you go on to the next one, levelling up in Braintree, the things that we launched at the launch with some of your members there. James Cleverley was present as well. So we're working with you on that, doing the follow-up. And the final, or the penultimate slide, is just some mapping of community capacity in Braintree, where the headline text says, I think our analysis shows from the Essex Community Need Index, which Braintree has some weaknesses because of the dispersed rural population that other parts of Essex don't have. That's not a pejorative comment about Braintree. It's just the nature of Braintree means it sees different sorts of problems and the community is stronger and weaker in different ways. And there's a complicated diagram showing that, but it was sort of traffic lighting the various things that we would associate with community capacity. And the final slide, which the team put in, is just some questions for discussion, but I think you know the questions you want to ask me, so that's just really a prompt. So listen, thank you for letting me set all of that out, and thank you for setting up the inquiry. I think it's vital work. I've given you a real high-level taster there, where I can follow up with detail now. I'm not, but we're very happy with colleagues across Braintree to work with you on the detail questions that you might have that I can't silence now. So, Chair, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's very interesting to hear that. So thank you. Members, before I invite you to ask your questions, I'd also like to underline that this is a short-term scrutiny review and that the committee only has one other evidence gathering session scheduled in the diary. Given the limited time available for the scrutiny review, I must insist that any questions asked is kept succinct and in line with the terms and reference for the scrutiny review, as the evidence gathered will help form the business of the committee's recommendations. Do members have any questions that they would like to ask Tom? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Tom, for your very interesting presentation. I was intrigued. You don't need to answer this, but I was intrigued to see that nearly a quarter of people thought parish councils were responsible for dealing with the cost of living crisis. As a chairman of a parish council, that scares me a bit. But more seriously, have you done any projections about what I see as the biggest shock, which is the energy price increases, going beyond this year into next year and perhaps 2024? How persistent is that? Have you got any information on how persistent that spike may be and how high it may go? Thank you.
Yeah. Chair, do you want me to answer these as we go?
Yes, please, Tom.
Yeah. So firstly, I mean, just to respond to the parish point, I mean, I must admit, I don't know, as I started to look at the slides preparing for this, I thought, I wonder what that is getting at. I wonder if, though, the important role of community awareness, some of what we saw in COVID, the close to the ground, the where you might go if there's a food bank or some other means of support, means there is a soft role. It's clearly not £150 checks from the parish in your sort of precept or reverse precept. But I think what we were trying to get across in the slides is there was a broader role here, particularly in very tough times. Do you open the parish hall if people are sat at home very cold in the coldest months of the year? I mean, I think we are going to have to think in a way that I'm in North London at the moment, sitting in 30-degree heat it's quite hard to make that mental leap. So I do think there is something in there. You will be much more experienced and close to the ground to what that means. On energy, so two things to say about this. I mean, one, like you, even if I wasn't a councillor officer, the sort of projections that Ofgem are publishing, the debates in the press, I think we're all largely operating off the same public data, and the offer of sharing what we've got is there. The thing that I do have, I don't know whether we can share this, but Mighty, who are our facilities management provider and who assist us on our buying our energy, we have been in the middle of renewing our ECC energy contracts, and I had to sign some of those off last week, and they give us a weekly energy price bulletin and monitor. In normal times that would come nowhere near senior leadership, and I got it for the first time on Friday. I mean, it does show, so firstly, it's detailed market intelligence of the sort that even as a county council we wouldn't be able to assemble, so it's specialist knowledge. And secondly, it shows that the winter 22 prices, because there are problems with liquid natural gas storage in the US before it's shipped here, and the ongoing debate about Nord Stream, shows that the winter 22 is really eyeball watering in terms of its onward escalation of price. So i.e. it's still going up, and the level that it is reaching. And you look at the mitigations, and it's quite hard to see anything you could be optimistic about. So I don't want to scaremonger on this, but we will all read broadsheet press, listen to intelligent media, and then when you see the market intelligence, and to some extent I'm a layperson on this, I'm not an energy buyer, you think, wow, I mean, it's really serious. So that's on our corporate energy. It does show for future spring quarter and winter next year, it comes down, but it will still be way ahead of long run trends. So if you simplify everything I've said, winter 22 looks, as is being said in the media, like a shock to the system on a level that we are just not experienced or ready for. That will be less in future years, but that relies on current assumptions about a certain assumption about Ukraine, but it will not reduce to normal. So I don't want this to be a doom and gloom session, but I'm sharing in a sort of open spirit the sorts of analysis. What I can do is see if we can share any of that market intelligence from our building contractors. I don't know, obviously, in Braintree, who supports you with your own energy purchasing, but that's the other place to go. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Pell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The slides that came up, it was difficult to take everything in because it was so complicated. Are we allowed to have those slides shared to us so we can look at them in our own time?
Yeah.
They'll be on the webcast as well, won't they? So.
Yeah, so they will be circulated after this meeting, Councillor Pell.
Yeah, happy with that.
Just before I ask Councillor Ball, I've got a couple of questions myself I'd just like to ask, if that's okay. One of your slides said to boost FSM take-up. What is FSM?
Free school meals.
Right. Okay. And you talked, one of the slides also said that with regards to rural communities, you're going to be hopefully reducing crime in the worst affected areas. So the NFU have said that crime has gone up 40% in the rural areas recently in their newspaper article. How exactly are you going to reduce that, do you think?
So that's a good question, which I think I will have to take away. I'm getting a bit of feedback, sorry. Go on mute. Let me take that back to the team. The detail of it will have been in our Levelling Up launch. And I know, because I did 18 months in DEFRA in between the jobs that I listed at the start, there were some particular, you obviously saw a reduction during COVID times, at least I think you did, although certain crimes like fly tipping were up. And we were very active at that point. So I don't know if that's a 40% increase on long run trends or against a low of COVID. But let me take that one away, Chair.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there has been sort of petrol siphoned out of cars and in a ward next to me, and things like trailers being stolen that have got goods on them and that kind of thing. So we're seeing a lot of, you know, perhaps what the police would call petty crime, obviously very disruptive.
Yeah.
And finally, I know that parish councils who own their own street lamps have found the cost of replacing them with LEDs very expensive. If there is any way that Essex County Council can actually help those parish councils replace their lamps with LEDs, I think that would be very helpful. So I'm going to leave that thought with you and move to Councillor Bohr, who I believe has the next question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wondered whether you had any statistics in the light of it's quite a shock to find out the extent of fuel poverty and all kinds of poverty and the kind of people involved. At low levels of income, inflation is very distorted and people spend huge proportions of their income on the three things, really: keeping a roof over their heads, energy costs and food. I just wonder how those three are going to play out, and because that would determine where to put resources and what percentage of those low levels of poverty is spent on each of those three things.
Yeah, so we have data, I think, on some of these things. I mean, like you, we will take from the ONS data sets and from some of the more reputable think tanks like Joseph Rowntree and the Resolution Foundation. And I was looking at the published data on fuel poverty, which I must admit, I don't know exactly what level it goes down to, but the maps I presented suggest you can take it below local authority level. So we have data, and I've obviously got a team that put these slides together. So happy with Braintree officers to share that. And I think this is one of the areas where it may make sense for our analytical capacity to be pooled. The other thing that if you're really getting into this and what's being seen on the ground, because inevitably national data on fuel poverty, the statistics, I think, lag the very real time and immediate pressure we're going to see at the point where the fuel cap is set and reset, which will be done on a quarterly basis, is to make sure that you're engaged, even if you have a witness at the second session. I don't know who else you're seeing from the CAB who's got that evidence directly. And of course, as elected members, you'll be getting that through your surgeries and your ward meetings. So we do have data. It will be pulled from the data sets that you have. Happy to share it, happy to work with Braintree officers. Sometimes it won't capture the real time. And so what we're seeing through CAB, through benefit claimant rates, perhaps through our own front door and your front door, will be, I think, equally as important. Because as you can see in the media debate, I say I haven't read today's news, but I see the headlines. Gordon Brown has been commenting, urging the leadership candidates to put together a national government package and to act now, as this may come very quickly. I don't want to sound alarmist. I'm not a deep expert on poverty, but just sort of my experience of public policy, you will see that sort of movement. So the short version of that, Councillor, is happy to share data and to provide whatever we can to inform your work here.
Thank you. I think our officer, Sherry, would like to add to that, wouldn't you, Sherry?
Yes, so just to let you know, Councillor Ball, that when we give evidence, when the team here give evidence, but also they're going to share a report with you that has been completed by Tracy's team alongside the University of Southampton or Portsmouth, Southampton, that's specifically looking into food, child and fuel poverty down to lower super output area across the whole of the district. So we can share that information with you, we can share the report with you, and it goes into a lot more detail, so it should give you what you need.
Are there any more questions at all? Oh, Councillor Kilmartin, thank you.
Thank you very much for a very complicated and interesting presentation. It's a two-part question rolled into one. The word crisis is, in my mind, something short-term. So would you consider that this cost of living crisis is temporary? And if so, what would you think would encourage the lowering of prices? Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the data is complex on this. Is it? Could it all go on mute, please? I'm getting real feedback. I'll try. That's better. Thank you. So the data is complex here, and I worked, as I said at the outset, with Andy Haldane, who was the chief economist at the Bank of England before coming to do the Levelling Up agenda. So in part, Levelling Up, which started before this cost of living crisis, was a recognition of the widening spatial disparities we see across the country. So we see them between London and the South East and the North and the Midlands, for example, but we see them within regions, and within Essex, we see them within Essex. So Essex makes a contribution to the national economy, i.e. it generates tax revenue and pays a surplus in, but the disparities in Essex are getting bigger. So on the long term, the Levelling Up agenda is part of the reforms I think that you need, which are about job creation, which are about the broader economic distribution of wealth. Shall I carry on?
No, that's fine.
And I asked you what would encourage the lowering of prices?
So, I mean, this is a sort of mega economics question, isn't it? What people say is that this crisis is driven by the shortage of supply. So the energy crisis is driving a huge part of inflation. There are other contributing factors, and you sort of see it if you go on summer holiday, labour shortages in airports or whatever else. So there's a huge adjustment post-COVID, and then there is the energy market crisis. And the Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, was setting that out last week. These are measures way beyond our control here in local government. And then you get into how do you target subsidies. So some of what the national government has done is putting money directly back in the pockets of households. The £150 council tax rebate is an example of that. But the question is how to target that to the right places. So there were people on the radio this morning saying the national insurance, if Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister, makes that change, it will benefit higher income households much more than it will lower income households. And then you get into the political choices. So if you want to bring down prices, you need stability in Ukraine and you need the economy to readjust post-COVID. If you want to support households, you have choices about the way to do that. Some will say tax cuts, some will say you do it through increasing universal credit. So those are the sorts of measures you have at a national level. And if you go to the slide that I introduced, many of those levers are national ones rather than local ones. I think our job in local government is principally about the small amounts of hardship funding we have and making sure people have access through every point that they might come into the council with the very best information about where to go.
Thank you,
I'll
Tom.
stop there.
Oh, thank you. That's great. I mean, this has been created through problems, and we thought that Brexit would be relatively short term, but then we went straight into a pandemic, and then we have the Ukrainian war. Well, Ukraine and Russia produce around 55% of the world's sunflower oil, and are major exporters of rapeseed oil, both of which are key ingredients for many foods. So it's way more complex than just fixing those things. It's likely to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. Thank you, members. If there are no more questions, am I correct? There are no more questions. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to express my grateful thanks to you, Tom, for taking the time to attend and speak to us this evening, and for your contributions to the scrutiny review. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll follow up. If someone can send me an email, we'll send whatever further information you want.
That's lovely. That's very kind. Thank you. Thanks.
Right, I'm going to dial off if that's all right.
So, bye-bye. We'll now commence with the second presentation, which I understand will be presented by Braintree Council's own officers. Could you kindly commence with your presentation? So we have, I believe, Suzanne Bennett, Corporate Director first. Is that correct?
I think you have Caroline first.
No, Caroline, I've got a list here, but I don't know if they're in order. Is that no particular order? So I'm going to leave it up to you. Who goes first then?
I think it is myself.
So
I will just take the opportunity quickly to introduce myself. I'm Caroline Elias Stevenson. I'm Head of Housing and Communities here at Braintree District Council. I'm just going to open the discussion today, but as you can see, there's quite a few of us here, so it is a shared effort, and I'll pass on to colleagues for a bit more detail as we go along. Thank you, Tracy. So tonight it is our intention to talk to you about what research has already been undertaken to date and the initial setting up of a working group. We also want to tell you a little bit about the community support and campaigns, benefit support and rebates available, what we have been doing to try and respond to rising fuel poverty, and what we hope to do moving forward. So early last year, as Sherry alluded to earlier, one of our research and performance officers in housing and communities was tasked with undertaking a piece of research around poverty within the district. The officer worked with the University of Southampton, who assisted with production of local area food poverty data and some mapping. The reports provide district maps broken down into lower super output areas for 3 poverty strands, which is child, food and fuel poverty. And then it overlays the 3 poverty strands to provide an overall picture of the district. And we will share this report with you at a later date. But there were some recommendations and actions that came out of the report. And these were around finding mechanisms to continue to monitor the fuel, child and food poverty households and methods of communicating with them about the advice and information that's available to support them. In response, an internal fuel poverty working group was set up, and this was to map services and support, to consider how best to work with partners, and an initial campaign was created called the Don't Wait for Winter campaign. Colleagues will tell you a little bit more about this over the next 10 minutes or so. So I will pass on to Tracy to go through some of the community support and campaigns.
Okay, good evening members. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy Parry, the Community Services Manager at the Council. So I just thought I would take you through some of the things that are already happening, either from officers within the Council or in partnership with other organisations. And so I'll start with the holiday activities, and these have been in place now for a couple of years, but had predominantly focused on the summer holidays. However, now in relation to Essex Activate, this is funded by Essex County Council, and it's a holiday activities programme that is now available every holiday throughout the year, and it's for those children and young people that are in receipt of free school meals, but also those that are deemed vulnerable. And when you look at some of that criteria, it could be children that are in care, those that are in foster care, those that may be in supported housing. So just some figures around that. So February half term and Easter this year, there were 6 clubs across the district. So they're currently in the 3 main towns, and there's a focus around physical activity, but also around mental health, and also some sessions for those with special educational needs. A number of partners are involved in those activities: Abberton Rural Training, Multisports for Schools, Manners Arc, Oliver's Lodge, Alpha Bake Cookery, and Making It Mindful. And it just means that those children and young people, apart from having activities both physical and from emotional health and well-being, also ensures that they get sometimes a breakfast and a cooked lunch as well. And the Braintree Museum Takeover Days, these are in partnership with Community 360, and these are focusing on what they would probably deem those that are just about managing. So potentially children and young people that aren't in receipt of free school meals, but whose families are on lower income. They also get the opportunity, and during the summer they're open 1 day a week over the summer, and there's lots of arts, exercise activities, and they're able to get involved in what's already going on in the museum. And again, they get breakfast and a hot lunch. So partnership support. So members, you're probably aware of both of these organisations. We've worked with them for a long time. So Community 360, they have supported 375 residents across the district through the Warmer Homes project, and that is a project that various partners, ourselves included, have been involved in, and also Citizens Advice, and also the Essential Living Fund, which I think Tom made reference to in his presentation. And the Essential Living Fund can help people pay for furniture, clothing, fuel connection charges, and daily living expenses such as food and toiletries. And having spoken to the officers at Community 360 recently, they've sort of been able to give us some ideas of the wards and where those individuals and families are coming from. So they were looking at Beckers Green, Chelmer Road, Bocking, Black Notley and Bradwell. And obviously they will keep us up to date with that data as it moves forward. Community 360 also have the Essex Family Support Service, and this is a service that's there for families who have school-aged children and who are not already receiving support from specialist and statutory services, so not involved with family solutions or social care or mental health services, but it's just really to support them at a more lower level, that early intervention and prevention level. And what they're finding from their caseload in Braintree is one of the key themes from their caseloads is around housing and finance. And then Citizens Advice. Members, you'll be aware that we have a partnership agreement with the Citizens Advice Service for Braintree, Whittam and Housestead. We provide a grant agreement for £112,000, and then there's a separate agreement for £25,000 for money advice. And those services are to support any resident across the district, to provide those with support around advice, debt, benefits, housing, employment, all sorts of services, and we'll continue to work with them. In relation to food poverty, we have food banks across the district. So they are in Braintree, Housestead and Whittam. And last year, those food banks fed 5,703 people and distributed 66 tonnes of food. And just from being in a meeting earlier with Lee Ranson from the food bank, anecdotally, they are seeing a huge increase in the numbers of people accessing food banks. But Lee has promised to provide us with data as it comes out from the Trussell Trust. I also just wanted to mention those three other organisations there, and they're just an example. There are many more community and voluntary groups across the district that are supporting residents. So the First Stop Centre, they have a community fridge. They receive fresh produce from the likes of Nando's, from Greggs, from supermarkets, and twice weekly people can go and just ask for a bag of food, or agencies can refer. And they try and sort of sell their community fridges to stop food wastage rather than the taboo around actually going because you can't afford food anymore. We then have Whittam Community Hub, who work with Fair Share and Neighbourly, again to collect surplus food from supermarkets to distribute to those most in need. And I'm sure you'll have all seen in the press that since 2019 they've had 30,000 interventions with people in Whittam and the surrounding villages. And then we have Soul Food in Housestead. So this is linked to St Andrew's Church, and they offer anyone freshly cooked nutritional meals at no cost. There's no qualifying criteria. They just want to provide and be there for everyone. And then just lastly, what I hadn't put on there was the Carousel Center. So this is in Braintree. Later this week, they're doing a free school uniform pop-up event. So anybody that needs school uniform, they can go along, whether it's for primary or secondary school, and actually get what they call pre-loved uniform for free. And then finally, so we've been working with our marketing and comms team, and we established our Don't Wait for Winter campaign. So this shows some of the graphics that the graphics team put forward, and there's been a number of social media posts through Facebook and Twitter. This is where I get stuck because I don't do social media. But basically, it was focused on the residents of the district, but also our employees. I think sometimes we forget when we're doing these things that our employees are also residents of the district. There was a different theme every week on social media. We also put together information leaflets to distribute at community events. There'll be some targeted information to go to landlords and local businesses to signpost them to relevant schemes. And just some of the data that the comms have sent me earlier today. The Don't Wait for Winter campaign on Facebook has reached 33,853 people, and the cost of living has reached 28,742 people, and Twitter slightly less. Obviously, people use Facebook a lot more than they use Twitter. But we'll continue with our communication all the way through leading up to the winter period and afterwards, and also how we share that information internally with our staff. And there will also be partner newsletters and communication channels. So they're just a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we've been doing with our partners to address these issues. And I think I'm now passing over to the one. Would you like me to do your pressing as well?
No, that's fine.
Right?
Thank you. Good evening, members. For those of you that haven't met before, you haven't met me, I'm Julie Rigby, and I manage the benefits and council tax services within Braintree Council. So the focus areas for my services are housing benefit, council tax support, discretionary housing payments, exceptional hardship support and the energy rebates, which we're actually involved with at the moment. Within housing benefit and council tax support, we're very limited by discretion because, as you know, it's a statutory function, so there is very little we can do to give discretion on those. But the other areas I'll go through with you now. So with discretionary housing payments, the customers that we can support with that are those that are in receipt of housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit. And we assist those with as much as we can. It's usually to top up the difference between their housing benefit and their monthly, weekly rental. What we're seeing at the moment is that the local housing allowances, which is what we base the housing benefit awards on, they haven't been increased since April 2020. And as I'm sure you're aware, the increases in the rent levels that are being charged now are going up almost monthly. So we're seeing customers now asking for support through discretionary housing payment where they've previously been able to find that shortfall between their housing benefit and the rent. But now they're having to spend that on household costs, food, just living basically. And they're the people that are now struggling to find that shortfall. So we are seeing an increase in the discretionary housing payments that we're making. So the discretionary payments, as you'll see there, for 2021, we made 267 awards last year, totaling 245,620. But for this year, the budget has actually been cut by 30%. So we are going to struggle to keep within the budget for this year, which is the 174,853. Rather than it going up, it's gone down. So I think we're going to be looking for some support there if possible. Q1 for this year, we've already made 76 awards to those that have needed support with their shortfall, with their rent or rent arrears to keep them into their houses at the moment and avoid evictions. We are actually permitted to top up the allocation by 2.5 times the budget. So we could actually top it up to a maximum of 437,000, but that would be out of Braintree District Council's own income. That would allow us to support an awful lot more people, but we appreciate that that's a pretty wild idea. For 2023-24, we're not aware of what the DHP budget will be. We don't normally find out until the January of the financial year that's coming, so we won't actually know that until next January, whether it's going to go up or down. The exceptional hardship provision, so that is to try and support those who are struggling to pay their council tax charges. We've been working with the Citizens Advice for some years now. It started in April 2013, so a long time ago, whereby we fund 25,000 to Citizens Advice, Braintree, Whittam and Halstead, to support those that are struggling. Citizens Advice will do a financial breakdown and see whether they can deal with any of their budget for them, and they'll give us a statement to confirm whether they feel that the customer should be supported with their council tax arrears. In those cases, we do help them by up to 24% of their outstanding liability for that year. So far for 2021-22, we supported 27 cases, which totalled £10,000. It doesn't sound like a lot, but they are exceptional hardship cases because the amount that we deduct from their council tax bill, obviously that comes off of the amount we've collected for the district. So we have to be mindful that, people are paying their council tax, and we are only providing this to the exceptional cases. We're also doing whatever we can for council taxpayers where they are struggling. We're trying to avoid putting them through to summons and obviously more court costs. Trying very hard not to put them over to the enforcement agencies. So the team are working with the customers on a one-to-one basis and signposting to support organisations such as Citizens Advice and Peabody wherever we can to avoid further financial hardship for those people. So the government energy rebates, we've already paid most of the mandatory. The only ones we haven't are where we're struggling to get the bank details for those customers, but they are very few and far between now. So most of those residents living in Band A to D have now had their £150. And we're now looking at starting the discretionary scheme, which was agreed by members. Those details of that scheme are in front of you on the slides. I won't read them all out for you. The particular criteria of the scheme where we've got households in receipt of personal independence payment or disability living allowance, we felt that was important because a lot of residents may be struggling to pay energy costs when they are having to pay higher bills due to dialysis machines, treatments for their medical health, whereby they're using more energy, those suffering from cancer that obviously need to make sure that they stay warm. So we are looking at those cases as well, and they will be one of the criteria that we'll focus on. We start from tomorrow, actually, paying some of the cases here, those in bands E to H who are in receipt of council tax support because they weren't included in the mandatory scheme, and we felt that was important for those. Those that are in band E to H and they're receiving a disabled rate relief from Braintree District Council, we're aware that they must be receiving disability benefits as well. So we're going to pay those automatically without the need for the customer to fill an application form in. So we've got 311 cases that we will be doing this week. We're making the first payments this week and then some more next week. The remainder of the discretionary rebate scheme, people will be asked to complete an application form, which we will have online, and any that we can pay, obviously they will receive £150 before the cut-off point, which is in November. If we don't spend it, we have to send it back, so we've got no intention of doing that, so we'll be getting stuck in with those shortly. Just a quick mention about the Household Support Fund, because we haven't got the budget for that. Essex County Council have got the budget, but they have asked us to administer an £80 to all pension age customers who are in receipt of housing benefit and or council tax support. We're looking at how we are going to do that at the moment. We're happy to do it. We're just trying to establish how we can physically make those payments. So that is in hand at the moment. And then just a brief note on some of the Department for Work and Pension initiatives that are coming up in the summer and autumn, just to make you aware of those. We're not involved in those, but I thought it might be quite handy just to let you know what they are. There is an additional £300 which will be paid to pensioners who receive the winter fuel payment. They'll have that to top up those payments. £150 is going to a disability cost of living payment, and the cost of living payment, which you've probably heard about, the £650, that is where customers are in receipt of income support, universal credit, etc. Sadly not housing benefit though, which is a bit of a shame, but there we are. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to Mark.
Before we go any further, Mark, before we get information overload, can we please just have a quick question session now? I think because otherwise I'm getting information overload. I don't know about everybody else. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Mrs. Pell.
Yes, I've been dealing with quite a few people just lately that have problems, and I've been through the benefit system and I can't praise them enough. They've been really helpful. I think people have to realise that a lot of these people that have problems also have health problems. They maybe have small children with them as well. Most of these things you've got to be able to get to the place. CAB at the moment, I've had this brought up with today, and I've spoken to Sue Wilson about it because she is CAB, that they've got to deal with Whittam. How can somebody from Halstead with a couple of children in tow get to Whittam to speak to them? And at the moment, with the poverty they've got, a lot of them can't afford to run their mobile phones. They don't have a house phone. There's nowhere that advertises where these people have got to go to get these services that they could really do with an information leaflet or a poster that's around the towns or the villages of what services are available to people who are in crisis. You know, it really is necessary for them. I mean, how would they get to Whittam from Halstead? That's several buses for a start, if they can afford the bus fare.
Okay, well, if you'd like to think about a recommendation, you know, when we get to the scrutiny, when we start discussing it, that would be helpful. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of very useful information, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't. Coming back to the energy prices, which I do think is the real sting that's coming at us. Do officers have any information about what the energy company's reaction is going to be if people don't pay their bills? Are we looking at a possible circumstance where they're going to cut people off, or do we have a sort of an emergency intervention level where councils and other agencies would step in to pay their bills for them?
Thank you. The energy companies themselves they have a hardship fund that they will offer to customers. At this point in time, can't comment on what the reaction would be from the energy companies if people started refusing to pay en masse. The concern is it would ultimately push the price up for everybody else, and that would be the negative impact from it. I know on media, social media, they're starting to bang the drums about potentially refusing to pay. Simply don't know at this time, I'm afraid.
I would just like to mention, I'm not absolutely 100% certain on this, but I heard a barrister on the radio today who said that perhaps one of the best ways round it is to negotiate a monthly payment, even if it is just £100, because then the energy company is unlikely to be successful in legal proceedings against you, and possibly just spread the payments out. That might be something that we could look into advising people. I don't know if officers can take legal advice in that respect and perhaps feed that out, or is that not appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, we would recommend it. We'd recommend people try and pay their bills if they can. But what we always say to anyone struggling to pay their utilities is contact your utility provider, have that conversation, and there may be a way to pay it over a longer period of time, possibly.
Absolutely.
I'll just come back quickly. I think if you looked at the slides that the gentleman from Essex County Council had, I mean, those numbers were scary. We're looking at something like 3/4 of all households in some parts of this district being in fuel poverty. from where we were on an average of 12% at the start of this process. So I just think it's a train coming at us down the tracks, and I'm not advocating people don't pay their bills, but I just think some people may not be able to, and we might have to think about, you know, what we do as a response to that, what we can do.
I think since this motion was brought to council, things have got considerably worse, and particularly since the Bank of England has put the interest rate up 5% last Thursday and has said that there is likely to be a recession lasting at least 15 months. So, yeah, it's not looking good. But we're here to help our residents, and we'll do our best to do that. Councillor Kilmartin.
Whittam Town Council is considering opening up the council chamber as a warm room. Yeah. I don't know how many days of the week it will be, and they're only considering. But it might be that the kind of places where lunches are held, like my lunch club in Whittam, and other places where elderly tend already to congregate, might turn themselves for the winter months, 6 months, into a warm room space, which would leave them a little more money in their purse to light the fire, as it were, in the evening and in the early morning, and therefore a grant to these places to help with their extra electric costs, like the United Reformed Church, might be a really good way of spending some.
It sounds like an excellent idea, and I think Sherry Root may be able to.
So members will be aware that we have recently put our Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan in. For year one, we've got a cost of living focus. And one of the projects that we are looking at is how we can support community and voluntary sector organisations to help people in their area. So we're not restricting it to warm rooms. It could be a range of different things that community and voluntary sector organisations would like to put in place. We're also looking at the warm room scheme ourselves as an organisation, but what I would say is that we haven't got that SPF money in the bank yet, so we can't spend it until we've got it.
When is the first amount likely to come forward for that?
So we're told that we're going to find out what is being, we'll get the money October time.
October, okay.
But we won't spend anything before we get that.
Planning ahead is always good, isn't it? So,
yeah, go for it.
So the other thing, we've had a meeting today with partners in relation to cost of living crisis, and there's already discussion, particularly with the Faith Forum, around offering warm spaces, and many of the churches, as our understanding, are intending to do such things. Yeah. So more of that will be coming out with later in the partnership in meeting.
That's lovely. I'm glad to see that people are becoming very proactive. Councillor Abbott.
Just very briefly, I was going to mention exactly the same as Councillor Kilmartin did. I mean, given that lots of people are already mentioning this, is this a coordination role for the District Council? Churches, town halls, village halls. There are some village halls, like in Rivenhall, which BDC owns, and others which are run by trusts. Just get a list of everything that's available and start to outreach now.
So I think Caroline's going to pick that up in her session at the end.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions here. I'm just right. Do we have any other data on Braintree district poverty? I mean, for example, I had a look and on the internet, and in the indices in multiple deprivation 2019, the Braintree local authority was ranked 203 out of 317 in the lower tier authorities. That was something advertised by Essex County Council in February 22. So I just wondered if actually there was any data that would be available to the committee.
So, members, I think if we send you the food, child and fuel poverty report, right. I don't want to steal its thunder too much because it's a really interesting report to read in detail, but the summary of that is that things look quite different. When you look at the district as a whole, that gives you one level of information, but when you break it then down into the 3 different types of poverty that we looked at, it looks very different across the district. So as you would expect, the rural areas have a much higher density of fuel poverty per household than you have in the urban town centres. But in the three urban town centres, particularly Halstead, Whittam, and Braintree, and there's one ward in Halstead that sits in both camps. That's where we're seeing more of a density around food and child poverty. So we will send you that report, members. It's available, it's ready now, and I think it can be sent through when the notes of this meeting come out as well.
Suzanne, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as you've said yourself, Chair, things are moving really, really quickly on this, and the situation has got more dire even since this was discussed at Council. And I think, as Tom Walker said, there's a lag in where the stats are. So that is a great report, but we need to try and keep on top as much as we can on the data as it comes through. But there will be a lag on what we know is happening on the ground and what actually shows up in their stats. And that's what we can start collating that information, that anecdotal information, and feeding it through, because we have people out there that are dealing with the community day in and day out, and as you guys are speaking to people out there. And so we're going to have to rely a bit on that anecdotal evidence, because it's such a fast-moving situation.
Yes, of course. And data from Citizens Advice. Do we have any data that might be available in how things have changed this year from last year with regards to Braintree, Halstead and Whittam Citizen Advice Bureau?
We've got Q1 data for this year, but we're just we did some comparisons for 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21. So we've got to do comparisons for 21, 22. So once that's done, we will be able to share that as well.
Would that be available before the next meeting, or maybe?
I should think so.
Okay.
Yes.
That would be lovely. I know we've got a very short period of time for this, unfortunately. I don't like to put pressure, but and finally, with regards to enforcement agencies, is there any data available about what the council has, how many times or how many people have been taken to or handed to enforcement agencies from last year compared to this year?
I'm sure we can get that for you.
That'll be lovely.
For the next meeting, yes.
Thank you. Lots to look at then. Thank you very much. I think, therefore, if there are no further questions... Councillor Mrs Cunningham, I'm sorry.
It's probably for Tracy. I mean, this is very much uncharted territory. I mean, can you think of anything, apart from perhaps the pandemic, where it's been such a broad spectrum of trying to actually get or plan help for residents? And the data there shows the number of people who have got disabilities and that you are aware of vulnerable. My concern would be that there are going to be families who have never known hardship, or who are actually, if the data is correct and what we can expect in the cost of fuel alone, are going to be seriously in trouble. Do you have data, or what organisations can you find out about those people? I mean, because there is obviously also a stigma about people admitting that they are in trouble.
Yeah, I think, and I won't steal my boss's thunder, because she will probably talk about this in a little while, but I think as a local authority we've got some really good partnership relationships with a number of organisations, whether they be Citizens Advice, Community 360, First Stop, Whittam Community Hub, and I think that is part of the role, is to try and understand what they are seeing on the ground, and even with organisations like Essex Children and Family Wellbeing Service, with schools, because, you know, we talk about data and there is a lag, but if people aren't accessing them services, then they don't get counted as the numbers. So we have to use the data, but also use some of that contextual information from what people are seeing on the ground. So I think as we move forward with the group, and we did only have our first meeting this afternoon, we will be able to get a clearer picture of what is going on. But I think, as with the pandemic, our community and voluntary sector are very good at helping out, and even, you know, people on individual roads, not necessarily linked to a community group, are willing to help out. So I think as we move forward, I think, you know, statutory services, community services, and just individuals will be key to all of this work.
And this probably is where councillors play a role, isn't it? We bring the information to you and from you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, even with the town and parish councils, you know, how we can get information and how they can feed information out to people, because you're always going to get that, I didn't know that. So the more avenues we can get the information out to people, the better.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Ball.
I don't know, excuse me. I don't know who to address this to, but excuse me. I was thinking about food poverty, and there was a mention on one of the links that we were given about providing recipes for people. There is, you know, an over-dependence on processed food, not only processed food, but ready meals these days. I read an article in the newspaper a few days ago saying that the most fuel-efficient, energy-efficient way of cooking a meal is a slow cooker. And it also provides an ability, you know, means of cooking a meal for less than £1 per head. I just wondered whether in a partnership with First Stop and others, maybe with supermarkets, we could get something going. A couple of years ago, I funded a scheme at First Stop which took people around supermarkets, taught them how to budget, took them back, they bought the food, and they involved a chef, a professional chef, who taught them how to cook, involved them in the process, and there was not only that, but there was a community boost as well, because they actually sat around a table and started to talk to each other instead of retreating into their rooms. So there's lots of benefits.
Yeah, and I think those schemes are things we're looking at again, but the slow cooker one is one that we have done previously with Community 360 quite recently. So I think, again, I mean, the Essex Children and Family Wellbeing Service do a lot of cooking courses with parents and children. The schools have done a lot of work around that, and we did that as well through the Live Well Child programme. So I think it's about how we collectively can deliver those types of programmes to the communities that most need them.
Thank you, Tracy. I think we'll see some chefs popping up with more value cooking. They normally do when there's a problem arises, don't they? Councillor Mrs Pell.
Yeah, I'm quite worried about the food poverty things at the moment, like the food bank is suffering. They're getting less donations because people are having a job just to feed themselves now, whereas they would buy a little extra to put in one of the buckets and things, so it would go out to the food banks. And also, these shops now, their shelves haven't got as much variety in them anymore, and a lot of them are empty shelves. And in Halstead, we've got a very successful community fridge. Even that is beginning to suffer at the moment because, like, allotment holders would put their spare vegetables in. They're not getting their vegetables. The vegetables are not growing and are lacking because there's no water. You know, everything's shrivelling up, dying. So that helped. So they're all beginning to suffer. And a lot of people use our community fridge. I mean, we're even bringing stuff in from Colchester to it. Yeah. So it is a really good service. But I do worry about the futures with all what's going on.
Yeah. And I don't think it's going to stop there. I mean, apparently the Dogs Trust charity has had a 55% rise in desperate owners saying they don't think they can feed their pets because pet food has gone up over 20%. So it's going to have a knock-on effect with mental health and all sorts of other areas. I think it's time now to move on. Mark, would you please continue with your presentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. For those that don't know me, I'm Mark Wilson, Sustainability Manager for the Council. I do the energy management for the organisation as well as the district, looking at fuel poverty, energy, climate change and other issues relating to that. When I put the presentation together yesterday, I looked online to see what other people are seeing in terms of the the stats and that potential price hikes with energy, not only the October one, but we've got one in January, and now, as I said earlier, they're moving to quarterly, so there'll be one in April as well. On Friday, I had a meeting with the firm that supports us with our energy management, trying to understand how long the price hikes are going to continue. The best estimate is something like a year and a half, but they'll be gradually reducing over that period, so there won't be such high leaps in energy. That's certainly the hope. But it is obviously a huge issue. Julie kindly went into detail on the monetary grants that we're able to give residents. My area is focusing on the physical measures we can put into homes to reduce their running costs, to help support residents bring their utility bills down. There's a number of schemes we're involved with, and we've been doing this for many years. These are the ones we're currently involved in. All but the last one, interestingly, which is the energy switch, which over the years has been hugely successful and we've won awards for. But when the prices started escalating with the price caps rising, unfortunately, iChooser, who run the national scheme, were not in a position to continue doing that because the energy auctions weren't able to commit to a price because they couldn't predict what that future energy supply prices would be. So I won't go into detail on all these, but there's a huge number of grants here, and they range from ones that support people on benefits such as Eco. Eco Flex is for people with household incomes under 30,000. We've had a funding stream in sustainable warmth, which is called LAD, Local Authority Delivery 2, we had 440,000, and we're currently just finalising, soon be launching LAD 3, which again is 1.64 million to bring measures into people's homes to improve their efficiency. For a number of years, we've been running a handyman scheme, which did originally start out purely on energy efficiency. It was to help clear people's lofts so they could have loft insulation put in the homes. And that's expanded into supporting people with disabilities and dementia and various other things, and trips, slips and fall hazards. It's a little scheme that we've run, but has been hugely successful. Solar Together, iChooser, who also do the energy switch. We've done 3 auctions on that, again encouraging residents to sign up to get discounted solar panels on their homes to reduce their running costs of electricity for the homes. So they're some of the schemes that myself and my 2 colleagues work with, and we get regular inquiries in. We line people up to, or we find a best fit to match which grants are best suited. In some cases, it's a combination of grants that people might qualify for. So just trying to get as much money as we can for households to put measures in. So this slide just looks at some of the savings you can make by getting things in. The Don't Wait for Winter campaign is hugely important for the prime reason that if people don't sign up to getting, say, cavity wall insulation done or lift insulation or replacement boiler, if they don't sign up now, there's risk that come the winter, and they do sign up then, which historically tends to be the norm. People start thinking about improving the energy efficiency of their home in the winter time. But we're trying to get people to sign up now so they're not at the back of a long queue. The concern at the moment is because of the numbers, LAD 2, which is the Sustainable Warmth Scheme, has been extended, and we've got a huge backlog of people signed up. So the LAD 3 scheme, which comes online shortly, there's already a long list of people wanting to get these type measures put into their home. This isn't an exhaustive list. I've just put them on there, just got to only fit those on the slide, really. You've got things like air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, contribution for those, solar panels as well. So they're all measures that if you put those in, that's the sort of saving you can make on your utility prices. And things like the old boilers, sort of G-rated boiler, if you've had a boiler for 20 years, if you switch to an A-rated one, you could be looking at £350 a year saving. It's incredible if you can do that, and there's grants available for it. So we're pushing really hard on this. As Julie said, Tracy said, we're pushing messages on Facebook, Twitter, any forums we can. We go to the community events. I went to saw pensioners group in Braintree a couple of months back, and was busy just running through all the schemes that got available for them. So we're pushing as hard as we can to get people to sign up to whichever of those grant schemes is applicable to them or combination, and get these measures put in their homes to keep their costs down. So that's kind of been covered already, so I'll skip past that one. Advice and guidance is absolutely essential as well. We've talked about the Don't Wait for Winter campaign. One of the fears people have is they get cold called by a company offering them loft insulation, cavity wall insulation. They don't know if it's particularly right for them, or they may live in a listed home and they don't know what might be acceptable, might not be acceptable. And we're here offering that advice on a daily basis to people, just to help people understand what measures they could benefit from. We partnered up with Groundworks. We've got a pilot project with Tendring and Colchester called the Green Doctor Service. We've been running that for a year now. And they're essentially giving advice to people on ways to save money at home. So it's things like putting in secondary glazing and so forth, draft excluders, things like that. So not only are we trying to do grants, but it's giving people advice. And it's advice on turning your thermostat down 1 degree, making sure at dusk you pull your curtains, things like that to keep the warmth in. It's just sort of the basic but simple advice that we try and push to give people as best we can. So one of the things that, in thinking about this and the impacts of it, if we do have a cold winter, or even a relatively mild winter, it's still the same concern, is what further impacts out there will it have if people aren't putting their heating on. And we're certainly aware that health issues, particularly heart, lung-related issues, if you're in a permanently cold environment, is detrimental to your health. So we're concerned that we're going to see an increase in health issues. So again, it's about that messaging as we go into winter to encourage and support people to try and make sure they're able to keep themselves as warm. And again, hypothermia, each year we flag the key signs for hypothermia. So trying to get people not only for themselves, but if they've got elderly relatives or neighbours, again, just be mindful of the potential impacts that a cold home can have on people. The other issue is the state of homes as well. If it's a cold home, isn't heated properly and ventilated properly, then you get a huge increase in condensation, you get mould growth and so forth. And so again, trying to get that messaging out there so people respond to that as well. This next one, there's a clear link between children's educational attainment and being an occupier in a cold home. So that's something that is often overlooked and tends to think of the elderly, but actually it has impact on children as well. Their ability to concentrate in a cold home is impacted. So again, that's something else we want to make sure that we're making particularly families aware of. We spoke about it earlier, this issue of people potentially refusing to pay. I'm sure we've all seen it on social media the last week or so. There's potential challenges to not pay en masse, and the impacts that may have, and potential legal issues and challenges that households they may face by doing that. Prepayment meters, absolutely hate them. People that are put onto prepayment meters are put automatically onto a higher rate of payment over and above what everyone else pays, and also they're actually paying in advance for their energy, which is the most galling thing. So I think it's almost guaranteed there'll be a significant increase in people being put onto prepayment as a method of paying their utilities, but that isn't a solution. It supports energy companies, it doesn't support residents, and those that hardest hit actually puts them in a worse financial position. On the back of that, if people aren't paying their utility bills, quite possibly they aren't paying rentals, their rent or mortgage payments, and so in all likelihood there's going to be an increase in evictions and defaulting on mortgage payments as well. One thing I was just going to add in, which I didn't put a slide on, but it came from a meeting I had this morning. So I was in Toppersfield this morning, meeting with the parish council up there. They've got, I think it's about 10 acres in total, and they're very keen to look at a community scheme, and they're keen to look at solar field array on their 10 acres that they've got. And I think all the measures that we're doing, whether it's the payments that we're making for people to reduce their bills or the physical fixes we're putting in, it's tackling the symptoms, it's not tackling the cause. And in tackling the cause is that energy independence in the UK, which we don't have to tie to global markets. And the concept we were discussing, I was with the county council as well, we went to Toppersfield, is giving that community the ability, if they go ahead with the solar scheme, to be able to offer residents reduced energy prices, and they've got an element of control over it as well, because it's homegrown effectively. Yes, it's not all year round with solar, but it's certainly for a proportion of the year, combined with battery storage. So that's one of the other things that we're starting to think about, and what our role in that could be, supporting schemes like that, whether we financially contribute or what that nature of that be, whether it's trying to replicate it in other communities. But it's trying to look ahead, not just get through this period of pain that we're going through, but longer term, how can we give communities that independence for energy? So I think that's all I had. So any questions?
Thank you. Yes, has anybody got any questions for Mark? Councillor Mrs Dervish.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your detailed report. Is the grant scheme just open for residents, or would this also be open for businesses, in particular schools and nurseries? And also, I just wondered if you've got any leaflets as well. Another leaflet sharing those.
There's different. Yeah, so there's different funding pots. So there's a funding pot called Low Case, which offers SMEs up to £25,000 to make energy efficiency measures. County have got some grants as well for community schemes. So there are other funding pots out there, and I'm more happy to sort of put a list together and share those. But yeah, so predominantly the ones I'm focusing on at the moment are for residents and just trying to get us through this current time. But yeah, we're very mindful that a lot of residents are business owners. They have small businesses in the district. It's not just at home they're suffering energy price hikes, it's within their business as well, and it's how we can support that. So yeah, it's through measures such as the Low Case grant, where they could get funding for insulation, say, or improving the heating or equipment in their business.
Councillor Mrs Kilmartin.
Thank you. I've got a couple of quickies. I've never heard this. Can you put solar panels on walls as well as roofs and in fields? Because blocks of flats could then have them, and I'd start applying. And the second one is, for the A-rated boiler, £350, how old must the old boiler be?
Okay, if I answer those two in reverse, so with the older boilers of what they call G or H rated, they tend to be sort of 20 plus years old. So if you've got a boiler like that, which could be very reliable, but is hugely energy inefficient compared to the combi condensing boilers we have now, yeah, you could be looking at £350 saving a year, just they operate more efficiently.
So the amount of time then you're saying is about 10 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And the solar panels on walls?
So solar panels, you can apply a solar panel vertically. Its efficiency will be compromised to a certain degree. If you can put it on a perfect south-facing elevation, they'll get the best efficiency from it. But
I'll be ringing in the morning.
So the answer is yes to that question. Preferably in this country, given our latitude, we look at something like about 30 degree or 33 degrees, the perfect orientation to benefit from summer sun and winter sun when it's a lot lower in the horizon. But
Thank you very much.
Is the grant for boilers means tested?
some are, some aren't. So, and that's where, because we've got such a range of schemes, with somebody ringing up, we try and shoehorn them into the most appropriate one or combination of grants. So, yeah, some of them are means tested and some aren't.
It has to be age related, of course.
Right.
But not anymore. Historically, it was, but not anymore.
Not anymore. Right.
Yeah.
With regards to the handyman scheme, are these handymen employed by Braintree Council?
I'd like to say it's plural, but it's singular, and he's very handy.
So we've just got one handyman.
Yeah, we have a chap called Kevin. Kevin Cooper, and he's brilliant. So, it's even things as simple as putting in a light bulb where someone's light bulb's gone, and for whatever reason they can't change the light bulb. But the impact, or the positive impact that has on somebody, is huge. But it's so things he'll do is he'll put jackets on hot water cylinders. He'll do draft excluders under doors. He'll support something like secondary glazing. So it's simple fixes that the other grant schemes, which are sort of larger, would otherwise slip through the net. So he puts in those simple measures, including things like the loft clearance, as I said originally, which is why we started that scheme in the first place, because you can't get the grant to get your loft done unless the loft is clear, and if you're not physically able to clear your loft, you can't proceed. So. Okay.
And does Kevin have a waiting list at the moment?
He's a very busy man.
He's very busy.
Yeah.
So is it a weekly long waiting list? I mean, how long is the waiting list?
It's a week or so.
It's a week or so.
Moment,
so it's not astronomical.
No.
At this stage. So.
No.
Okay. And right, that's lovely. Thank you. I'll leave that one there. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yeah, just doing the back of the envelope calculations on your first slide on the energy price going up, and I know it's a hobby horse, but I'm going to keep coming back to it. Before you take account of whatever payments the government might give back, well, we know they're going to give back some to support people. We're looking at top end of roughly £300 million going out of this district to energy companies. The difference between the cap as it was and where it might get to. And that is a massive amount of money going out of the district. What the question I wanted to ask, though, relates to energy efficiency and insulation. I was looking at some stats on this the other night. The UK has the worst performance in terms of heat loss from its housing stock of any country in Western or Northwestern Europe. Now, some of us have banging this drum for decades and not being listened to. And isn't it the case now the chickens are coming home to roost? Not just in our existing housing stock, but in the fact that, as a member of the planning committee, we have both hands tied behind our back, is the ability to require developers higher energy efficiency in terms of insulation, renewable energy, rainwater storage, and all of these things we should be doing. Now, I'm sure you're going to say there's nothing more the council can do, but is there anything more we can do, both on existing housing stock and new build, to sort of push this agenda? Thank you.
Yeah. Acknowledge the constraints of the planning system, and I think the sort of solution on that at this current point in time is trying to negotiate with the developer early on. We've only got so many teeth through the MPPF that we can apply and require measures, so it's trying to find other ways we can work with developers for that. The existing stock, absolutely right. We do have a much older stock, particularly in our district. We have a lot of listed buildings. It's also the rural areas in the north of the district. So there's a double whammy of combination of solid wall housing, and they're off gas, so they're reliant on oil. And those properties are the ones that are really going to suffer through this period in time. And again, we're trying to target those as best we can with getting things like external wall insulation and upgrades to boilers.
Oil clubs.
Yeah, oil clubs will sleep. There's a number of those. Many parishes set their own up. That has an advantage, and you can see potentially up to sort of 5 to 10% reduction through efficiencies and economies of scale. So yeah, anything and everything we push and promote as best we can. So.
Mark, do we currently advertise what listed buildings can do to help their energy efficiency? Do we directly contact listed building owners to give them advice?
We're giving advice when they contact us. I know the planning team are putting together advice on what measures can be installed. Historic England as well, there's a lot of detailed information on their website of what owners can do for listed buildings. But they just happen to be more challenging because you're trying to do something that's sympathetic to and keep the aesthetic to the building or maintain it. It's difficult.
Yeah, that might be a recommendation to actually do some more comms on that. I think listed building owners are often perceived as being wealthy, but quite often elderly people just stay in their houses and just cope with what they've got. I know a lot of people who've got listed buildings, but they're not necessarily very warm, and they don't really know how to change things. So that might be one to consider. Councillor Ball.
Yes, just following up on James's point. We do, in a small way, build affordable homes each year. I don't know how much control we have over that, but can we not at least ensure that those are all zero carbon, maximum energy efficiency? It's possible. It's been possible for many years to build a house that could be heated by a light bulb. Why can we not go the full mile on that?
If I'm right, I might be right to say, but I don't think there are any mandatory requirements for the construction industry to install energy recovery systems. Am I right in saying that, Mark, at the moment?
Yeah, so there isn't a requirement for sort of zero carbon homes. There's some positive developers such as Hastos who have created their own interpretation of the passive house standard. We've had some built certainly over in Stystead, a number in neighbouring districts as well. So there are developers out there that are keen to build that higher standard. I think what we will see, particularly coming through this energy price hike, is demand from residents, particularly for new build, that they want to see an energy efficient home. There'll be an expectation that the house they move into is going to have an A or B rating. I think that's one positive that will come from this. I think that we'll see a shift in the build standards for energy efficiency.
Do we have any particularly wonderful energy efficient homes that have been built in the Braintree district? And would it be possible to actually showcase those on the website as the type of thing that Braintree Council advocates?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to speak to Hastos. They're very keen to demonstrate the buildings they've created. So.
Yeah. Food for thought, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wondered if people had, not just developers that have built a lot of houses, but also individuals as well. Just so that we can advertise that sort of thing would be quite good.
Could these homes be built under a local development order where we set our own standards? As we have done for the Horizon 120.
Well, I know certainly when we were looking at the garden community schemes, that was something we were aiming for. So it's not in the standard planning process. It isn't something we're going to require. It's where if we go into something like the garden community approach, you can actually put a requirement for those sort of standards.
We'd have to refer to planning, really, I think, as well, to see sort of what, under what constraints they're in.
Our standards at the moment are probably just about reaching where Scandinavians were American settlers.
They go through building regs, not through.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Oh, it's working. It wasn't earlier. Hello, thank you for your presentation. It's been very interesting. I am rather interested in solar panels.
Excellent.
And I bitterly regret not taking full advantage of the government scheme a few years ago. And I am now looking at them for myself, because there is one or two properties where I live who have, and my house is south facing, so you can imagine it's perfect for it. Is there any schemes at the moment with regards to building that, I didn't hear this earlier, but are there any schemes regarding building properties now that give the purchasers the option of having solar panels when the house is being built?
I don't know the answer. The answer probably will be yes, and I think some of the bigger house builders give, particularly if people are purchasing off spec, they get an option to go for that particular type of kitchen or bathroom, and also energy efficiency measures, higher rated windows, things like that. So I think those options are available, particularly for the larger schemes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think we better press on now. We've got a few more presentations, haven't we?
Just me left.
You.
Just me.
Lovely.
Back to me.
Thank you.
So I will try and whiz through these, only a few slides, just really to talk about some of the options moving forward. And I will ask if I've missed anything, my colleagues here along the panel to pitch in, because it is a real team effort. So we do recognise that the response to this crisis is not something that we can undertake alone. And there are many organisations already within the district looking at ways to help our residents. We have, on the back of the Fuel Poverty Working Group that we had set up internally, have now set up and had the first meeting today, actually, of the Cost of Living Partnership for the Braintree district. Some of these partners are shown up on the screen. It's not an exclusive group, so it will evolve. The membership of this group will evolve in response to the requirements of any issues arising. As you've seen here today, there's officers from Environment, from Housing and Communities, from Revs and Bens. We're all on that Cost of Living Partnership as well to bring every aspect and cover every aspect that we can. Our role in that partnership is one of coordination, really. So I think Councillor Abbott and Councillor Cunningham alluded to earlier where our role sits, and it is a coordination within this partnership to lead and to try and drive any initiatives. But one of the things that I think it's important for this group to look at is not to try and reinvent the wheel, but actually look at what this is a national problem, what's happening elsewhere, and can we learn from others. So there is a piece of research to be undertaken as well. So the purpose of the partnership, as it says up there, is to collectively respond to the national crisis on a local level through coordinated joint working. So whilst, as I said, we know that we can't solve this crisis in its entirety, we will be looking to support the residents of the district through enhancing any opportunities, education and signposting that we can do. And agencies will be offering advice on a range of subjects. And that's from money, where to get food and essentials, how to reduce living costs and fuel and energy saving tips, and looking at any practical measures we can implement. So we're still at the beginning of that journey. So talking today about warm spaces, that was raised at the meeting today. Initiatives around giving food and budgeting advice around recipes. Those are all things that will come onto the agenda. In our first meeting today, we did identify some themes to head up the kind of response under the umbrella of cost of living, and that's financial, fuel and energy, housing, health and wellbeing, with a real focus as well on horizon scanning, and a bit of an immediate focus on winter and Christmas, because we feel that that's a bit of a hot spot. Before I do go on to any questions, one of the things that we have asked all of the partners at the Cost of Living Partnership today is to, as quickly as possible, bring forward any data, information and intelligence that they have. So we were talking about that lag in data and information that we might have, what's happening on the ground. So we have asked and had some really, really useful feedback today from some of the partners, but just to put that into something collective so that we can have a look and do a bit of analysis and continue to monitor trends that are happening. So we've asked for all of the partners today to bring that forward as quickly as possible so that we can look at that. So I hope that information has been useful for you today. Unless any of my colleagues have got anything else to add from the partnership meeting today, is there any other questions?
I've got a couple here that I've missed. Mark spoke about pulling curtains and things to reduce. Do we work with any charities that actually give out curtains or exchange, or are there any curtain charities that... Yeah, sorry.
Look at me, thanks, Mark.
No.
Not that I'm aware of, no, but I'm always finding new things, so you never know. I'll probably ask one of the team tomorrow and they'll go, oh, yes, there is. So I'll pose the question and see if anybody knows anything.
You know, you put up with the same ones until they become threadbare, and I think some people might find that interesting if they can get thicker curtains at a reduced cost, or... yeah, I know there was a shop called Curtain Exchange, but it was it was a business. And my second question was the government rebates. Did the council manage to locate 100% of people eventually? I know that it was at 90-something% the last time I looked. For the £150, I know you were trying to contact people to get their bank details. Was that successful?
Yes, there are very few accounts now that we haven't been able to pay to, and they're still striving to pay them. So, you know, we haven't given up on that. We're constantly onto those cases to keep trying to contact them to find out why they haven't responded. So, yes, the majority have been done. There are very few left now, but we will make sure that we do get all those.
Thank you. Councillor Kilmartin, you.
Yes, thank you. Just to help you, Chairman, I bought my velvet curtains that are nicely lined from a charity shop for £20 about 7 years ago, and they're absolutely wonderful at keeping the heat in. So I would advise that you have a look in the charity shops.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, Mrs. Kilmartin. Right. Any more questions, anyone? Or are we finished for tonight? Right. Sorry, just this bit down here. Just close off these agendas before further questions. Yeah. Okay. Right. I'll write myself a note. Okay. So thank you, members. If there are no more questions, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to express my grateful thanks to the officers for taking their time to attend and speak to us this evening, and for your contributions to the scrutiny review. You've been very helpful. I appreciate that you've all given up your time this evening to come and do this, and you've worked very, very hard, having gone through Brexit and the pandemic, and now you have a cost of living crisis on your hands, so I don't envy you. But thank you very much for this evening. I will now proceed to item 7, urgent business. I mean, essentially, if any of our officers want to leave, they probably could, couldn't they?
Madam Chairman, I think this part of the meeting will take less than 2 minutes to
we'll just
conclude.
finish
So,
it then. Okay.
Happy for you to proceed.
So I'm not item 7, urgent business and close of the meeting. So I'm not aware of any urgent business for this evening's meeting. The next meeting of the committee will take place on Monday, the 5th of September, 2022 at 7:15. And I'd be grateful if members could make a note of this date if they've not done so already, please. This item concludes our business for this evening. I'll therefore close the meeting of the Combined Scrutiny Committee at
9:15.
At 9:15.